Welcome to another Bible study of prophecy, the end times, in the book of Revelation. Thank you so much for joining me today. We have been walking our way through the book of Revelation, learning as we have gone about the end times events from a heavenly perspective. And that's really what the book of Revelation is about. It's about God looking down and seeing the events unfold, his throne room, or think of it as his command center, where he is really orchestrating all of the events of the end. And we are seeing that unfold before our very eyes as we read through the book of Revelation. Last time we went through Revelation chapter 9. We're going to get into Revelation chapter 10 here today, but before we get into Revelation chapter 10, I just want to do a quick recap on what we have come through and what we have been talking about. So today, as we get into Revelation chapter 10, just a quick reminder, Revelation chapter 9, and what we have seen, we've seen these incredible events beginning to take place. We have looked and seen the seal events. And the seal events, we saw seals 1 through 7 and what all of those meant. When the seals 1 through 7 were unleashed, when they were broken, what happened was they unleashed the scroll. So the scroll would look like something like this, with the seal around it, with a little wax seal, a string wrapped around it with a little wax seal. They would have broken all 7 seals. When the 7th seal was finally broken, chapter 8, verse 1, when the Lamb opened the 7th seal, now there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. Now we have looked at and seen what all of those seal events look like, and the timeline that I have been showing you has, I believe, it looks something like this. Now, these could be off. Again, it's all speculation, trying to put the pieces together, but up to the point of the beginning of the seals, we have seal, really starting with seal number 1. These are really the trigger for the final 7-year tribulation events that happen. Just according to what it says, it seems like that in the beginning of the book of Revelation, we have the 7 ages of the church, and I believe that those really correspond well, that we are in that final church age of Laodicea. Now, it says that after these things, after the time of the Gentiles, God is really beginning to move toward the end. We have the final 7-year tribulation, and it kicks off with these seal events. Now, what was the seal holding? What was the scroll that the seals were wrapped around? And most likely it is the statement of judgment, because this scroll is going to come back into play later as we get into the book of Revelation. As we begin to get to the final times, we are going to see that this scroll is going to become relevant again as judgment is being read over humanity, and that's going to happen over these next couple of chapters, next 3 or 4 chapters that we're going to get through. So seal number 1 kicks off the events. You have 7 seals that happen. At the 7th seal, that's when John saw 7 angels who were standing before God, and these 7 angels had 7 trumpets. Now, the trumpets are the pronouncement that God's judgment is going to be coming, and I've related that to the city of Jericho when the Israelites first went into the Promised Land. The very first place that they came to, the very first establishment, was Jericho, and they marched around the city 7 days, every day blowing the trumpet, and on the 7th day they blew the trumpet 7 times, and the walls fell down. And we are on the precipice of the eternal presence of God. We are going into the forever promised land. It's not just Israel that the Israelites were going into. We are going into the forever promised land. And so now we have the trumpets being blown in preparation. The warning is happening. The warning signs are taking place. It's time to get yourself ready, because the end events are upon us. Now, if we've looked at that, if you look at the book of Matthew 24, and you also look at the book of Daniel, and really the last several chapters of the book of Daniel, you're going to see all of these timelines intersect. You're going to see the beastly empire, the signs that Jesus tells us to look for, and then the view from Revelation on what is actually going on. And so the midpoint, that 3.5-year point, is the time where Israel is really being attacked, and that's the Abomination of Desolation. So really, the final seals seem to, and then we've looked at that, really seals 6 and 7 seem to happen near the end, because then the trumpets are going to happen, and the trumpets happen in pretty quick succession. Now, we've looked at what those trumpets were. The first trumpet was blown by the first angel, and it was where John saw hail and fire mixed with blood, and they were thrown down upon the earth. A third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass burned up. Now, again, remember that John is from the perspective looking at events that he can't describe because he's never seen events like this before, probably never even heard of events like this before. John is from a first century perspective, trying to make sense of what he is seeing. So when he says that there was hail that was being thrown to the ground, and it says that there was fire mixed with it, and there was blood, and a third of the earth was burned up, I believe firmly that what he was seeing was some kind of a, in trumpet number 1, he was seeing some kind of a meteor shower. And the meteor, that's not spelled right, I don't think. But anyway, meteor shower. That was happening, and you see all of these things that look like hail to his perspective being thrown to the ground. They had fire trailing behind them. They were on fire. They were lit up looking like blood, looking like fire, and when they hit the ground, they burned up a third of the earth. So a third of the earth was burned up, and from John's perspective, yes, this is going to look like hail because that's all he's probably ever seen is hailstones. He's not seen a meteor shower, but it looks the same. It looks very similar, and it's going to be burning up a third of the earth. Now, hail is not going to do that, but a meteor shower that maybe some of them still on fire as they strike could easily burn up a third of the earth, especially if it is, it's going to be, if the world is really dry. It's a very dry world that there's not been much rain or moisture upon the world, that this blaze would easily catch and run through maybe through an entire continent, as he is seeing this. Again, this is his perspective. This is what he is seeing. These meteors that are striking, that's what it seems like if you look at the first trumpet. You look at the second trumpet. What is happening in the second trumpet? Well, that is this huge mountain that was ablaze with fire was thrown into the sea. And again, from John's perspective, now you're looking at a larger meteor that is also trailing with fire, and this now is going to be thrown down. And, depending upon the size, the tsunamis that could happen as a result of it hitting the sea, and the devastation that it could have there on the sea, and maybe not to mention if it hits, the potential of earthquakes under the ocean, or, somehow affect upon the ocean floor, that could easily happen. And he says when he saw this, a third of the sea was turned into blood, a third of the creatures living in the sea died, a third of the ships were destroyed. And again, that just makes sense if you think of a massive tsunami that could possibly happen as a result of that. Now, number 3, the third one, he saw a great star fall from the heavens. Now, we know that the word star is astere, A-S-T-E-R-E, if I remember right, the Greek word that can also be used to describe asteroid. And the idea of an asteroid is now even a larger object that is falling. Now, all of these will happen in quick succession because, a smaller meteor shower, a larger meteor, and so the meteorites, the meteor, and the larger asteroid are probably all within the same grouping that are approaching the planet. And so now you have this one on fire again. So this larger larger asteroid, this thing that is falling upon the world, and this asteroid is going to, it says, this great star, burning like a torch, it's going to fall on the rivers and on the springs of the water. The star's name is wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood and made people die from the waters that were bitter. So this is going to have another devastating impact upon the world. Now you have, with that, you have right behind that, you have the fourth type of trumpet that is being sound. And now it says that a third of the sun, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars were struck, so that a third of them were darkened, a third of the day would not shine as well as a third of the night. So now you have, again, another astrological event, probably in quick succession, probably, again, traveling in the same grouping. And this time it either does a couple of things. It either actually impacts or hits the moon, and it hits possibly the sun. You'd think, well, why doesn't it burn up? And that's a good question. I don't know exactly what that's going to mean or what that's going to exactly look like, but somehow it hits the moon, and the result of that is that a third of the day and a third of the night, a third of the day would not shine as well as a third of the night. And so just think of what could happen if the moon is struck, that it changes the speed of the rotation of the planet. Or maybe it knocks the planet off of its axis. It's the planet being pummeled by the meteorites, the meteor, and this major asteroid, which is going to cause catastrophe upon the world. If it hits the sun, the moon also, it could easily darken out the sky. It could knock the planet off the axis. It could slow down or change the rotation because the moon has been struck, and that would definitely cause a third of the world to really not see the light at day or the moonlight at night reflecting off of it. So we have some event. So all four of these trumpets seem like these are astronomical type of events. These are things that are happening to the planet, kind of a pummeling that is happening not only to the planet, but also potentially to the moon and even potentially to the sun, although the sun could just be blocked out because of the change of the Earth's rotation or knocking it off of the axis. That's going to change the days, by the way. If the Earth is not rotating the way that it's supposed to, then you don't have the days. When Jesus talks about you will not know the day or the time, my personal opinion is because of these trumpet events, the clock is going to be thrown way out of whack. You're not going to know what day it is. You're not going to know what time it is. You're not going to know how long things have passed. There could be major changes to the way that the world is rotating. We could, lose power. We could lose the ability to even tell what day or time it is. So it just all makes sense that it all can flow together. By the way, these correspond to the things that Jesus says in Matthew 24 that will happen at the end, right before the return of the Lord, and that is these kind of astronomical type of events that are going on. You have after this, after the number 4, then you have events that are not dealing with these things happening. Now you have events of the end times military conflict that is going on. So you have number 5, and number 5 is, after the 5th trumpet sounded, it says, I saw a star fall from heaven. So now we have a star falling from heaven. Now the star that fell from heaven, and we talked about this last time, so go back and watch that, but the star could mean, there could be 3 different possibilities with the star. I'll give you what I think it is personally in just a moment. But the star was given a key to the bottomless pit. He opened the pit, and smoke rose from the pit like a smoke of a gigantic furnace. The sun and the air were darkened by the smoke from the pit. Then from the smoke came locusts upon the earth, and power was given to them. Like scorpions have power over the earth. They were told to do no harm to the grass of the earth or any green plant or any tree, but only do harm to the people who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. And they were permitted not to kill them, but to torment them for 5 months. So we know that this is, again, happening right toward the end, and they are allowed to torment those who do not have. So these are the people who don't have the seal of God. Now, let's just look at this for just a second. So just again as a reminder, the star. What was the star that was falling from heaven? When we looked at 3 different possibilities last time of what the star was, my personal opinion is the star is really, what he is seeing is Satan being cast from heaven. Now, you think, well, hasn't Satan already been cast from heaven? This does not mean heaven in the throne room of God. This means the heavenly abode, the spiritual realm. I believe that that's what is being talked about, that Satan is being kicked out of the spiritual realm and he is actually coming down to heaven. He's actually coming to this place. Now, if you look at Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12, it says this: "How you have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations." Now, that's a reference to Satan being cast down to the earth. Now, we've often thought of that or talked about that as Satan being cast down at the very beginning. But what if this is also a prophecy of what is going to come here in Revelation chapter 9, verse 1, when the star is being cast down? Again, let me read it to you. "How you have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn. You who have been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations." Let me read from Revelation 9 again. "Then the fifth angel trumpeted, and I saw a star that had fallen from heaven to earth. The key to the bottomless pit was given to him. He opened the pit, and smoke rose from the pit like smoke from a gigantic furnace." So when I look at this, my mind goes to this connection between Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12, and what is going on here in Revelation chapter 9. Chapter 9, starting in verse 1, that the star is really Satan being cast down to the world, meaning this is the final battle, the final conflict. Now, Satan is going to give his power to the Antichrist. When Satan gives his power to the Antichrist, now you see the Antichrist moving with power like locusts upon the earth. And where are they focused? They are focused on Israel. In particular, they're focused on Jerusalem. That's where this locust power is going. And it says that of this group, they are not permitted to harm the grass or the trees, which is, they wouldn't care about harming the grass or the trees. They only have one thought in mind, and that is wiping Israel off the face of the earth. They were permitted to harm the people who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. Now, in most Bibles, pretty much every Bible, you will see the word God capitalized. However, I think that that is incorrect. It should be G, smaller, lowercase G-O-D, the seal of God on their foreheads. Now, if you look forward into what's going to happen when the Antichrist is on the world, and you see the Antichrist being on the world, you see the beastly empire, the mark of the beast, that it says that the second beast was permitted. This is chapter 13. The second beast was permitted to give life to the image of the first beast, so that the image of the beast could even speak and cause all who would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. He also causes all, the small and the great, the rich and the poor, the free and the slave, to receive a mark. What is the mark of? It's going to be a mark of the God they follow, which I firmly believe it is the Muslim empire. It is the Islamic God, the mark on their right hand or upon their forehead. And so no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. And so that pattern, that picture, is the fact that this Revelation 9, trumpet number 5, that Satan falling from heaven, giving his power to the Antichrist, this one final push, like locusts coming against the nation of Israel and other parts of the world, by the way, but mostly the nation of Israel is the focus. They are coming. Now, they can't kill them, but they're going to torment them, so much so that in this torment, people wish that they were dead. You know, it's like taking pleasure in tormenting them up to the point of death. What fun is it just to kill them when we can torture them? That's the tormenting, the torturing. And who are they going to torture? The ones who do not have the seal of God on their, not the seal of Yahweh God, Elohim, the Creator, the seal of the false God, the God of Islam, on their foreheads. This is also the God who will mark the people in Revelation chapter 13 with the mark of the beast. Now, the mark of the beast is not the vaccine. You can be pro-vaccine or anti-vaccine because of the vaccine itself. But it has nothing to do with the seal. If you take the vaccine, you are not getting the seal of the Antichrist. You're not getting the mark of the beast upon you. This is going to be known. This is going to be well understood. It is going to be a choice. You will not be able to buy or to sell without this mark of the Antichrist system upon you, and it's going to unfold. You will not accidentally take this. You will knowingly have to take this purposefully, and you will absolutely know as a Christian that this is certainly the mark of the beast, and you will know that. That won't be hard to understand. We'll talk about that in a few sessions when we get to Revelation chapter 13. So you see chapter number 5, they are coming against Israel, and it's in this time frame that they're coming against Israel in this final grouping here, this final 3.5 years. This is what the Bible describes as Jacob's trouble. This is the time that they are going to be coming against the nation of Israel. So Satan is fallen from heaven. Isaiah 14:12, Revelation 9:1. Satan falls from heaven. His power is transferred. This great pit rises up, and out of it these locusts are coming. The locust is the picture of these major military groups coming against the people of God who do not have the mark of Allah on their foreheads. Now, the people of Israel, even if they haven't surrendered to Jesus, they still will not have the mark because they follow the Old Testament idea of God, the Yahweh God. So they will not have the mark of Allah on their foreheads. This is the final conflict, the final battle. Now, number 6, trumpet number 6 sounds, and then you see this incredible great battle that is going to happen. Now it is this battle that is going to be coming from the east. You're going to see this incredible number of 200 million troops. This troop size, now my personal opinion is this is a picture of China and probably Russia combined. And if you look, they're creating some coalitions right now that should have us worried and concerned. This combination of China and Russia, you see that the breastplates, or from John's perspective, most likely what he is seeing is the military insignias upon them is going to be red, blue, and yellow. And if you think of China and Russia, you have Russia being the white, red, and blue flag. You have China being the red and yellow flag. And so just really if you look at the colors just match what Revelation chapter 9 says. And so what you see is this incredible thing. Now, John describes all of this in a way that makes it seem like it's animals that are part of this, but it's not. It's really the military machinery that these military mights have. And so really you have this final incredible battle that's in the 6th trumpet that is being sound. So all of those that were not killed by plagues, all of those who were not killed by war, all of those who were still alive through all of these events, God says of them, they still, even after all of this, would not repent and turn their hands away from, or they would not turn away from the works of their hands. They would not stop worshiping demons and the idols of gold and silver and stone and wood, which cannot see or hear or walk, and they did not repent or turn of their ways from their murders, their sorceries, their sexual immorality, or their stealing. So in all of the events, all of the trumpets that are being sounded, remember that's God's final warning that it's coming to an end. It says that people still would not repent. And that's ultimately the sad fact of all of this, that even through everything they're seeing, they still would not repent. Now, if you're a follower of Christ, you're going to start seeing these events unfold before you, and so you can watch along and see as all of the events happen and just know in your heart, know in your mind that this is all true. God laid it out and it's unfolding before our very eyes, and so it should encourage you, strengthen your faith so that you will not walk away or fall away as all of these things are happening. Well, let's get into chapter 10, and chapter 10 is going to be a pretty quick read here today. There's not a lot that we're going to talk about it. We're just looking again at some commentaries that are happening. Chapter 11, we're going to see some other events that are coming on the scene at this very end time, and that's going to be in this time we are going to see these what are called these two witnesses that are going to happen, and again they're going to happen near the end of what's going on, and then we are going to see trumpet number 7, which Paul talks about as the last trumpet. At the last trumpet, God is going to gather his church, he's going to gather his people, remove them, and then his wrath is going to be unleashed upon the world. And for as bad as all of the trumpets are going to be, as bad as all the seals are going to be, it pales in comparison to God's vengeance that he is going to take upon the world. So let's look at chapter 10 together here today. So John writes this again. Remember, John is writing this from his perspective, and John is writing from a first century perspective, so he cannot put words to what all of the things that are being said. So just remember that as you read through the book of Revelation, some of it can be kind of confusing until you realize, well, John is just writing it from the best perspective that he possibly can. John didn't have a complete knowledge of the way that the world was going to go. So for us, if we start plugging in what we see in the world, it makes sense with what John is trying to wrap his brain around and use his ability to really connect in his mind as he is sharing those things with us. So John writes this, and this is again after the sixth seal has happened, or I'm sorry, the sixth trumpet has been blown, this great military conflict, the final trumpet that is going to happen before God's final removing of the church and his unleashing. At the sound of the seventh trumpet, he removes the church and he unleashes the wrath upon the world. So before the seventh trumpet is unleashed, it says this, "Then I saw another powerful angel coming down from heaven, wrapped in a cloud with a rainbow over his head. His face was like the sun, and his feet like pillars of fire." Again, what is the symbolism that he is saying? What is John literally seeing here? Just an incredible shining brightness of this person's face and feet like pillars of fire. He had in his hand a little scroll that was open. He set his right foot on the sea and his left foot on the land, and he cried out with a loud voice, just as a lion roars. When he cried out, the seven thunders spoke. Now that is just a little bit of a glimpse of Psalm 29 verses 3 through 9. This doesn't, it really doesn't go with Revelation other than the fact that that's how God speaks. God speaks with this thunder. Psalm chapter 29 verses 3 through 9, it says, "The voice of Adonai is over the waters. The God of glory thunders. Adonai is over mighty waters. The voice of Adonai is powerful. The voice of Adonai is full of majesty. The voice of Adonai breaks the cedars. Yes, Adonai shatters cedars of Lebanon. He makes Lebanon skip like a calf, Syrian like a young wild ox. The voice of Adonai hews out flames of fire. The voice of Adonai shakes the desert. Adonai shakes the wilderness of Kadesh. The voice of Adonai makes the deer writhe in birth and strips forests bare. And in his temple all are saying glory." So what it shows and what it speaks to is the power of God, the power of the voice. So the seven thunders are going to be this incredible power, this incredible powerful sound or powerful voice that is speaking out. And he cried out, the seven thunders spoke. And it's very possible that that's a picture of God now speaking out his judgment upon the world. And the power of God's voice is enough to just shatter a tree. You know, think of pictures you've seen of a tree exploding. Just the sound of God's voice can explode a tree. This is how powerful the Creator, the Almighty, the ever-present God really is. The Ancient of Days, he is powerful, and his voice speaks thunder and power into the world. And that's the picture of what John is seeing. John is seeing this angel coming down and this little scroll, and he cries out with a loud voice, just as a lion roars, and he cried, and the seven thunders spoke out. And when the seven thunders had spoken, I was about to write. Now, again, I think that this is coming out of just from my perspective, just from reading it, and you combine that with Psalm 29, but it just seems like this is the voice of God. The voice of God speaks, and John says, I was about to write what I had just heard, really God speak, but I heard a voice from heaven saying, don't say it. Seal up what the seven thunders have said. Do not write it down. Now, if you go to the book of Daniel, that is going to be reminiscent of what Daniel says. I'm not going to look up Daniel right now I'll look it up real quick. But it's reminiscent to what God told Daniel in Daniel chapter 12. The angel had told Daniel during his revelation that he had seen. God spoke to him and said, go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed until the time of the end. He says that in verse, so I'm sorry, that was verse 9. Verse 4, he says, but you, Daniel, close up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. So it's going to be sealed until the time of the end. How will you know it's the time of the end? Because many will run back and forth, and knowledge will increase. We live in an age today where Daniel chapter 12 verse 4 is being fulfilled. Many will run back and forth. Now look at the advancement we have had in planes and trains and automobiles. You can get from one end of the world to one side completely to the other side of the world in about 15 hours, 12 to 15 hours, depending upon where you're going. One side of the world to another. That's people going to and fro. Many people will run back and forth. You get in the car now and you can drive through town, through whatever city you're in, wherever you live, and that is easily going back and forth, moving back and forth. They will run back and forth. Get on a high-speed train and you can go from one part of a continent to another quickly. Many will run back and forth, and knowledge will increase. We have more knowledge at our fingertips today than we have ever had, just through the phone, through the computers that we have, through the internet. But we are also making technological advances today in every part of the world, based upon all of the understanding that we have, that we know, the ability that people have, and the level of creation that people have had, the inventions that people have had, the technological growth. And so we have Daniel chapter 12 verse 4 being fulfilled in our time. And God told Daniel, seal up the words of the book until the time of the end. How will you know? Because many will run back and forth and knowledge will increase. And then verse 9 I already read. He says, go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed until the time of the end. So Daniel's book was sealed until now, and he's saying the same kind of thing to John. Seal up what the seven thunders have said. Don't write that down. So you're going to seal it up. It's not going to be written down. Now the angel, John says, whom I saw standing on the sea and on the land, raised his right hand toward heaven and swore. Now this is not a swearing of, saying a bad word. He's raising his right hand and he is making an oath. The swearing is making an oath by the one. Who is the one? That is God himself. By the one he swore, he made an oath to God who lives forever and ever, who created heaven and what is in it, the earth and what is in it, the sea and what is in it, that there would be no more delay. So now we have reached the end. No more delay. Once trumpet number 7 sounds, it's done. This is the end. Once number 7 sounds, we are finished. It is finished. It is complete. There will be no more delay. So we are at that point now. Now we're going to step back as we get into the next chapters. When we get into Revelation chapter 11, we're going to see some commentaries, almost like if you've watched a movie and they will have a flashback scene, or if you play a video game and they will have a flashback, or they'll have something that is describing what is going on, giving you more detail and commentary. That's exactly what starts in Revelation chapter 11, and it's going to go through chapter 14, where chapter 14 is where The church is finally going to be removed. Then you're going to have getting into chapter 16, where the 7 bowls of wrath are now unleashed upon the world. But between really 11 and 14, we're going to have some commentary, some flashback, some helping us to understand exactly what's going on. But what John is saying here in chapter 10 is we have reached the end. There is no more delay. We are at the finish line. We are about to cross. And he says, I'm swearing this by God who lives forever and ever, who created all the heavens, all the earth, all the sea. It's done. It's finished. There is no more delay. Verse 7. But in the days of the voice of the 7th angel, when he is about to trumpet. So now you have him. It says he is about to trumpet. He hasn't trumpeted yet. He is about to trumpet. So we are right now in between 6 and 7. 7, it hasn't been done. He says, the previous verses, we have reached the end. There is no more delay. Now he's about to blow the trumpet. And it says, the mystery of God is completed. What is the mystery of God? Well, mystery of God is what God has been really what he's been revealing to his people, to the prophets, from the very beginning of time. You have an incredible timeline if you look at the Bible's timeline. That's a terribly crooked line. So let me draw that again here. So you have this timeline that God has been revealing from the beginning of time. It really is very interesting if you look at what the Bible says is the time of the world. In the time of the world, you have a period of basically 6,000 years from the beginning of creation to where we are at today. Now, I'm going to bring this up to you because I think this is an interesting thought. Now, again, this is speculation, but it seems like it's a very real possibility. From the time of creation to the time of Noah, you had a period of time of 1,000 years. From the time of Noah to the time of Abraham, you had another 1,000 years of time. From the time of Abraham to the time of David, the King David, you had 1,000 years. And from the time of David to the time of Jesus the Messiah, you had another 1,000 years. Jesus, from the time of Jesus until where we are at today, you've had a period of time of roughly 2,000 years. Now, if you look at all of that, you add up all of that time, you come to a total of 6,000 years. Now, in Jewish thought, basically 1 day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is 1 day. So what you can look at in this time, this time frame, is that if you just assigned a number of, instead of 1,000, you just looked at 1, you are looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If 1 day is 1,000 years and 1,000 years is 1 day, you have 6,000 years, which is the equivalent of 6 days. Now, where have you heard 6 days? Go back to the book of Genesis. In the beginning of the book of Genesis, God created over a period of how many days? Over 6 days. On the 7th day, what did God do? On the 7th day, God rested. On the last day. In Jewish thought, that 1 day being 1,000 years, 1,000 years is as 1 day, that right now we are in the 6,000 years, or we are in the Sabbath cycle. 6 days, 6,000 years have been completed, and now we have reached the end. When we reach the end and Jesus returns, he will take the throne, and there will be what is called the 1,000-year millennial reign of Christ. The millennial reign of Messiah. What is that 1,000 years millennial reign of Messiah? That is the time of rest. And then you have, at the end of the time of rest, you have new beginnings. And what happens on the new beginning? Now, the new beginnings, the pattern of God has been, it happens every week. You are supposed to have 6 days of work, and then you have the 1 day of rest called the Sabbath rest. And then on the next day after the Sabbath rest, it is again, you've come to day 1 of the new week. Everything is new. It's a new week, and everything is brand new as you go forward with your next week. It has always been the pattern. If you look at this as the ultimate pattern, that you've had 6,000 years or 6 days of God's work, and then you have the 1 day, the 1,000 years of rest being God's millennial reign. Following God's millennial reign, you have the new beginnings. You have the new Jerusalem. You have the new earth, the picture that we are going to get to and see of God coming down or bringing this new Jerusalem out of heaven. And the size of this thing is just incredible. You have this incredible event that's going to happen. That follows the pattern, the Sabbath pattern of life, the Sabbath cycle of life. So when he says it is just about completed, we are looking at this completion here in this particular time. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen today, but I'm saying we are getting close to the precipice. We are getting close to the end events. If you look at it from a biblical perspective, that you have reached the 6,000 year mark, you've reached the 6 days mark, and now you're about to venture into the final resting day, the final 1,000 years of the millennial reign of Jesus before everything begins again, and you have day 1 of the brand new, day 1 of the new beginnings, day 1 of what God is going to do next, the birth of the new age. And so it is about to be completed, the mystery of God. The mystery of God is, this mystery has been laid out from the beginning of time. It was laid out from creation, and then corruption happened, and then it was redemption made possible through Jesus himself. He redeemed us, and he made his redemption accessible to us, that he became our perfect sacrifice and Lamb of God, and then we will go to be with God forever, and we will enter into his rest. We will enter into the rest of God and be with him in the new beginnings, in the new day, in the new plan that God has with the new Jerusalem and the new earth. Now, God says this to John. He says that the mystery of God is completed, just as he declared to his servants, the prophets. By the way, in Amos chapter 3, verse 7, it says this. It says, "For the Lord Adonai will do nothing unless he has revealed his counsel to his servants, the prophets." So God has, that's why it's so important to know the word, because God has revealed to, really to the, when you say the prophets, you can reveal, the prophets are, the words are recorded in his word, revealed to the prophets, but revealed to us through his word. And so you need to be reading his word, because the revelation of God is made possible through his word. The word is not just a collection of ideas and good thoughts. This is the word of God given to people. It's the intersection of God and humanity where we can know him. He has already declared all of this. That's why we can study these words of revelation, and it can start to make sense, because God has revealed everything through his word to us. Verse 8, "Then the voice that I heard from heaven spoke to me again, saying, Go, take the scroll that is open in the hand of the angel standing on the sea and on the land." So this angel who has the scroll, he heard the trumpet sound. It's all completed. It's all coming to an end. God has already helped us to know this. He's made it possible. Now John takes that little scroll and he puts it in his hand from the angel that was standing on the sea and on the land, who had made this oath and this promise to the Father. Verse 9. And we'll close it up with verses 9 through 11. "So I went to the angel, telling him to give me the little scroll, and he tells me, Take and eat it." Now, this picture is exactly what happened in the book of Ezekiel. In Ezekiel chapter 3, verses 1 through 3, you have Ezekiel taking the scroll and eating the scroll as well. So he tells John, take it and eat it, consume it, help just take it into you. It will be bitter to your stomach. So the thing that you're hearing, it sounds like it's tough news. It sounds like this is horrific. It sounds horrible, but it will be sweet as honey in your mouth. It's going to taste good to you. It's going to feel bitter. It's going to be hardships, but it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be sweet because we are going to see the Lord's return. We are going to be a part of this. We can experience this and know him. So John says, so I took the little scroll from the angel's hand. I ate it. It was sweet as honey in my mouth, but when I had swallowed it, my stomach was made bitter. And they tell me, you must prophesy again about many peoples and nations and tongues and kings. So there is more to the story. There is more that needs to be shared. And the prophecy of John has to be written down so that we can understand it, so that we can consume it. Even though it tastes, it's going to be wonderful, it's going to feel bitter because of the problems that we are going to have to face and endure as we go through these times. God has always had a plan, and his plan is coming to an end. He had a plan from the very beginning of time, from the very beginning of creation. God, who is all-knowing and all-powerful, knows how these events are going to all unfold, but they're all unfolding according to his will and his plan, and he is about to bring it to a conclusion. Now, we are about to see trumpet number 7 sound, but we're going to get through some other commentaries and some other parts of the story, some filling in the gaps of the story before that 7th trumpet sounds. Now, that doesn't mean that there's a big gap from the 6th to the 7th in God's timeline, but he is just taking a step back to fill in the gaps so that we can understand exactly what is going on in God's economy and the way God is working out. So we're going to see these two witnesses coming on the scene. We're going to see the 7th trumpet begin to sound, and then we are going to see a flashback in chapter 12 of the mother, the child, the dragon, and the war. And it's going to be an incredible picture of Satan coming against the nation of Israel, coming against the child, that's Jesus, being born into this nation. And we'll take a look at that. And then in chapter 14, we're going to finally get to the time of the harvest. That's when the actual trumpet is sounding and the harvest is actually happening. Well, thank you for sticking with me. If you stuck with me to this long, all the way to the end, thank you for being a part of this. I hope you're learning and gaining some knowledge of the book of Revelation. It's not as difficult to understand as people try to make it out. It's a lot more easy to understand when you put all of the pieces together and you connect all of the dots from the old and the new. God is unfolding this before our eyes, and we are going to see a lot of these events in our lifetime beginning to take shape. I don't know how long it's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be, years or if it's going to be decades. I don't know if it's going to be how quickly all of this is going to happen. But we definitely know from the events that we are seeing in the world that we are marching ever closer. We may not be in the birth pangs, but we are feeling those Braxton Hicks contractions, which is getting the body ready. The earth is getting ready for the events that are going to be coming. And we are going to see more and more of that as we keep marching forward toward the end. Well, thanks for meeting with me today. Thanks for studying with me today. And I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. I hope you have a wonderful week and that you'll join me back here next week as we get into Revelation chapter 11. Until then, God bless, and I'll see you soon.